All right, so hopefully you can see the screen. Today we will be talking about long-term care, and I have a wonderful strategic partner with me, Mr. Michael Barber, here to actually provide a lot more context for a solution in how to address long-term care planning. If you joined this experience before, we get a lot of details into the why we should address these things, the what and the how. And oftentimes what's missing is the actual application of ways that you can provide resources for long-term care. So for my conversation today, I am going to be limited in my speaking. Yay for those people that are tired of hearing me, talk all the time. And Mr. Mike is actually going to be taking over a large part of our conversation. Prior to that, I do want to go over a few housekeeping items. One, I always welcome questions and feedback throughout our conversation. So if you are familiar with the Q&A feature of your Zoom, please utilize that for any questions that you may have, for any conversations or content that we go through this evening. Number two, if you have any feedback, if there's something that you would like more clarity on, and if we have the time to do so, I will address those things as well. If they're more personalized and very specific in nature, I may just ask that we connect one-on-one to go over that individual question, just for, again, the sake of time. And as always, you can always expect a replay or a follow-up from me for any call to action items that we present throughout the conversation. So I know I did address Mr. Mike. He will be going over why he's here, the strategies that they provide, and the partnership that he provides to me and my practice for my clients. As far as for the hat, it is Thursday. We were just talking about our football fandom. So I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. We have a kickoff at 8 or 8:30 against Cincinnati Bengals away team. So pray for the Steelers today. In Jesus' name, amen. So if you are looking on the screen, you might be seeing a few questions. I'm going to skip that and get really into first the introduction for those who may not be familiar with who I am. My name is Marcus Rather. I am a financial advisor through Cetera Investors. I do work here in the Charlotte office as well as the Richmond office located in Glen Allen, Virginia. And I service all of my clients throughout all various different states. And one part of financial planning that we're addressing today is long-term care. Really going to skip a lot of these slides, again, based on time, but I will preface this with a story. A recent story that I have of a client that I've actually had the pleasure of working with for a limited time, but in the area of long-term care. Her name was Aunt Catherine. I was introduced to Aunt Catherine, unfortunately, towards the latter part of her years while she was receiving constant 24-hour care. And at the time that I was introduced to Aunt Catherine, she was paying for care and was concerned of how long she would have her resources to provide for the care that she was receiving. Now, a few things that I learned about Aunt Catherine. One, strong, independent woman. Aunt Catherine had never married. She also did not have any children, but she had a very lovely neighbor who provided some assistance for things like staying on top of her bills, being very communicative with her and Aunt Catherine's sister, which Aunt Catherine's sister was her power of attorney. And at the time that I was introduced to Aunt Catherine, she was worried that she would not have enough money to receive the quality of care she desired to stay at home. Now, Aunt Catherine did a lot of amazing things. One, from her professional life, she was an educator in Richmond and inspired many youth to grow into young professionals and grow and provide for their family. She had been retired for many years, and she had done an awesome job, outstanding job of having her home paid off, living on her income for retirement, and she did have outstanding nest egg for retirement, whether it was savings at the bank, retirement accounts, whatever the case may be. Now, at the time that I was introduced to Aunt Catherine, unfortunately, she had spent a lot of her resources for her care. And what she found was that her cost of care was 2 or 3 times the amount of her normal household bills. Now, I want to put that again into perspective. Aunt Catherine had her home paid off. She did not have a car payment. She didn't carry a lot of debt, but she found that she was paying a significant amount for 24/7 around the clock care. So much so that it was about $10,000 to $12,000 a month in purely cost for care, not just cost for home. So anything for her utilities, her groceries, anything, property taxes, those were not included in the cost for care. Now, unfortunately, Aunt Catherine has since passed away, and she did have enough money to provide the quality of care that she would like to have received at the time, and she was able to pass away comfortably. But it did raise the question of, man, I wonder if Aunt Catherine knew at retirement that she ever would have experienced the type of health that she had in retirement. And even more important, I'm like, man, at the time that we got introduced, I wonder if such a solution were available to where we could provide extra income to provide resources to offset her cost for 24/7 care that maybe would have extended her wealth to make sure that it lasted as long as it needed to do. So that's really the story, and that prompted the conversation of, well, what are the ways that we can address long-term care planning? Understanding that there is no perfect solution, right? As you just heard, did have savings. She did minimize her expenses, and she did receive the quality of care. But the uncertainty was, well, if I need care for much longer, how much longer will my funds be able to last? And my thought was, well, I wonder if there was something we could have done years ago, what could we have done to just extend the resources so that was not a concern in her retirement? So with that context, I do just want to briefly touch on, if that's the why, I want to talk about the what. So what is long-term care? You may hear us use acronyms like ADL or jargon like activities of daily living, but you can define long-term care as the inability to perform at least 2 of these 6 activities of daily living without supervision or without assistance, or maybe even at all, right? So as you can see on the screen, those things are bathing, dressing, eating, transferring, toileting, incontinence, and hands-on or standby care. But those 6, bathing, dressing, eating, transferring, toileting, and incontinence, if you find that you're unable to perform 2 of those 6 without assistance or without supervision, you may find that you are indeed in need of long-term care. And why is this a pressing matter? So 8% of those people who were polled found or expect that they may need long-term care in their retirement. But in the reality, it's believed that 70% of those individuals or couples who are 65 or older would actually need long-term care. So what exactly is long-term care? We'll talk about the different types or qualities of care. As you can see on the screen, it's not immediately nursing home care. While that is an avenue, and that's the traditional sense of providing long-term care, over the years and with advancements, with additional resources, you can receive care in many different types. So you have at-home care, community-based care, independent living, assisted living, and then nursing home. So just briefly touching on at-home care, that can look like care received from family and friends. Maybe there are support services, home health aides, or you're just receiving medical equipment. Typically, you're appointed a case manager for any medical needs that you may have. Community-based care can look like adult daycare. It can look like social support or health services. Now, I would say community-based care, while that's a general definition, is really dependent on the community in which you live. Some community-based care only provides adult daycare services, where they may or may not do anything from medications or things along those lines. Some may only offer social support. So either community-based care, while that is an avenue, depending on your community, it may limit the type or quality of care that you get. Independent living, you see continuing care for retirement community, independent living plus, and limited help with personal care. While this term can cover those still living at home independently, it often refers to housing units, often apartments or townhomes that are connected to a continuing care retirement community. Assisted living is pretty much an example of something in the middle. So where the resident may need help with daily medications, if they need assistance with dressing and grooming, but you can still perform some activities on your own. If one's need for help with activities of daily living exceeds what's possible with added services as one continues to live independently, stepping up to assisted living is likely the next step. And then naturally, you have the cost for those cares. So I'll just pause here and really shift gears because hopefully that gives a broad overview of what long-term care is. It's the inability to perform 2 of those 6 activities of daily living. And then the ways that you can receive that care is not just nursing home, but you have assisted living and things of those nature. So, Mike, I think it might be a better time for you to take over and just introduce what resources can look like to provide additional money for that care.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus, and thank you all for joining us. Just as Marcus said, I'm Mike Barber. I'm a regional marketing director with Lincoln Financial. That's a fancy way of saying that I work with advisors like Marcus to help clients like yourself formalize a healthcare plan in retirement. So we're going to talk about what that is, why we wish we do that, and then also the solutions that you have available to help offset the costs and give you access to the healthcare that you need and the healthcare that you deserve as you get older. Many people don't know that when we reach retirement, Medicare does not cover all of our healthcare expenses. The healthcare, what we are used to, shifts and transitions into something very different once we reach retirement. So there's 2 types of healthcare in America. There's acute care, which is what we're all familiar with. So it's prescription medication, it's surgeries, preventative maintenance, even any specialists that you may need to see. Conditions that lead to needing acute care are one of 2 things, just to put it bluntly. It's either something that we're going to recover from, or to put it bluntly, something that's going to kill us. And if it's one of those 2 things, it's largely covered by acute care or Medicare once you get into retirement. But near the end of our lives, we're exposed to a different type of health care called chronic care or long-term care. It's conditions that we're not going to recover from. And they're conditions that typically start being onset in our mid-60s, maybe our mid-70s, or even early 80s. Things such as rheumatoid arthritis or joint replacements, maybe a broken hip that's not going to repair or recover because we're a bit older. Or the granddaddy of them all is Alzheimer's and dementia. Right now, 1 in 3 individuals over the age of 85 has Alzheimer's and dementia, and they're expecting those numbers to increase as the baby boomer demographic is going to be aging into their 80s here in just several years. So today, we're going to talk about a couple things. This is the agenda they gave me, but I'm going to detour from this a little bit. We're going to talk about why we would formalize a healthcare plan and what it costs. We're going to talk about how we would do it. And we're going to talk about some of the ways that, or solutions or products that you can use to do so. So with that, like we said, long-term care is the need to have either in-home care, assisted living, or a nursing home. Now, we spend most of our lives with these big moments that we have, from getting our first job to starting to plan for retirement as early as possible, utilizing a 401k or even an IRA. We have a child, right? These are moments that change the trajectory of our entire lives and introduce new things and factors that we need to plan for. And then probably the biggest moment that we have, or at least one that we're all striving for, is reaching retirement. And while we spend our entire life saving to reach that milestone of retirement, many of us don't spend enough time planning to protect the things that can derail us in retirement. The 2 biggest expenses and 2 biggest surprises that people see in retirement is taxes and healthcare. And our conversation today is going to be a conversation really around addressing both of those 2 things. So like anything else, we have seen and heard the word inflation a lot over the last 5 to 6 years, and healthcare has not been protected from experiencing some form of inflation. In fact, it's been outpacing every other industry. They project typically that we experience a 3% inflation rate across all markets and all products in our economy every year. Where this gets alarming is since the pandemic, we've seen a decline in supply of healthcare workers, specifically in the long-term care space, which makes sense. Nobody wants to work a labor job anymore. Everybody wants to work from home. And then you couple that with the baby boomers, the largest demographic in human history, going to reach their 80s in 2027. The first baby boomer will reach 80. It's going to put a lot of pressure on our healthcare system. And I'm not the brightest light bulb in the office, but I am smart enough to know that a declining supply and a rapidly rising demand is going to do a number on prices. They're actually projecting that over the next 20 years, we should see a 6% inflation rate in the healthcare space. So just to put it bluntly, they're expecting and projecting the cost of long-term care to triple in 25 years. So whatever numbers we're going to talk about today, they're projecting that to triple, which quite frankly, if you're in your 50s or in your 60s, that's really what we're preparing for, as long-term care events typically happen to folks in their mid-80s. So right now, I want to give you a website for you to use that you can do some research on your own, and I encourage you to write this down. There's a website called whatcarecosts.com, whatcarecosts.com. And when you log into the website or when you pull it up, it's going to ask you for a sponsor code. If you use the words LTC for long-term care or Larry Thomas Cat, right? LTC, it allows you to put in your own zip code, and it pulls up all of the actual care providers in your area and shows you what they actually cost. There's some good news for those of you that are in the Carolinas. We are the 5th cheapest state in the country for long-term care, but that does not mean it's cheap by any sense of the imagination. In-home care, about 12 hours of in-home care ranges from around $300 to $500 per day. The average long-term care event costs about $10,000 to $12,000 per month. Of the 70% of individuals that Marcus mentioned that will experience a long-term care event, the average length that they need care is now 3.7 years. I've been in this industry for 13 years now. And when I started 13 years ago, the average length of a long-term care event was only 2 years. So it's almost doubled over the last decade. Quite frankly, they're doing a very good job keeping us alive longer without necessarily increasing our quality of life. So what you're seeing on the screen here is the average annual cost of long-term care, or somebody that may need in-home health care, what the national averages are. And as we talked about, they're projecting those averages to go up significantly over the next 20 to 25 years. Now, Marcus did a great job mentioning what exactly is long-term care. Well, it's two things. It's when we either, one, need assistance with 2 of those 6 activities of daily living that you see on the screen. Quite frankly, they're the first 6 things you do when you get up in the morning. Or if you can't remember your own name, right? If you have Alzheimer's or dementia, many times you can do all of the things on the screen, but you still may need someone to take care of you to prevent you from either hurting yourself or causing bigger issues. All right, so there are about 5 ways that you can pay for long-term care, and everyone's plan for healthcare looks very different from everyone else's, right? It's personalized to you, to your family, and those around you. The first is Medicaid. Medicaid is the only form of federal health insurance that's going to cover long-term care. Now, Medicare, not Medicaid, will cover 90 days of in-home care if the doctors deem that you're getting better. They have to deem that you're going to be getting better within those 90 days. So maybe if you're young and you fall and break a hip and you're going to need someone in your house to take care of you for a couple months, Medicare will cover that. Anything outside of that scope, if you're not deemed to be getting better, if you're going to stay the same or be declining, that is not going to be covered by Medicare. The only form of federal health care, like we mentioned, that will cover that is Medicaid. And Medicaid typically does not cover in-home care. You're going to have to go to a Medicaid nursing home, which is somewhere that I can assure you nobody wants to go. So unfortunately, the #1 way to pay for long-term care in America is to spend your assets down until you have 0 assets to your name so that you can qualify for Medicaid, which makes sense. I think 50% of America doesn't have a penny saved for retirement. For everyone else, for anyone else that puts a little bit of planning, we can avoid that process, because spending down your assets to qualify for Medicaid is a very difficult and painful thing to do. They have some tools that can help you do that. There's something called a Medicaid trust, where what that means is you can give up control of all of your assets put it inside of a trust so that you're reporting 0 assets and 0 income, and that'll allow you to qualify for Medicaid. The tricky thing about this is if you're going to do that, you have to do it 5 years before your health declines. The assets have to be out of your name for 5 years before you can qualify for Medicaid. So essentially, you have to give up control of every penny well before your health begins to decline, and it's a very difficult process. And there's anytime there's a minor mistake with your reporting, what you're getting for income, if any of those trust assets come back into your name, you'll no longer qualify for Medicaid, and you'll be in a very tough position. So our number one line of defense, quite frankly, is our family. And when you look at the evolution of families over the last 50 to even 100 years, this wasn't a very big problem in the 50s because the average household in 1950 had 5 children, which makes sense. My grandparents had 7 brothers and sisters. My mom's side had 8 brothers and sisters. That is unheard of today. So many times, years ago, the family would come together to take care of an aging parent. We've had a massive culture shift where the average household now has 1.7 children. A lot of folks are not having kids these days. Even outside of that, the technology, like we're all on a Zoom call right now, has allowed people to disperse and live throughout the country. It's not as common that the family stays together in one town. Things are different than they used to be. So without our family, that is our first line of defense. It becomes much, much more important to do this planning because we all have a healthcare plan. It's either yours or somebody else's, or somebody's going to put a plan together for you and have to be there to make those decisions. One of the things that I think is very important and why I'm passionate about doing this is I've seen people and worked with people that have had plenty of money. They can afford to pay for these things, folks that are worth 10, 15, $20 million even. And what happens is it becomes the family's decision of when to get help. If when the children step in and they start to look at what the cost options are, unfortunately, I see this all too much. They're typically shocked that it's going to cost between $10,000 to $15,000 a month. And that leads to them preventing or not getting the help that they need because they think we can wait, we can come together, we can help take care of mom. That's what results in people needing to go to a nursing home. It's when you don't have somebody to care for you, you slip and fall in the shower and break a hip. And when you're in your 80s, it's not something that you recover from like in your 50s. So formalizing your healthcare plan early, putting some thought behind it, empowers your family to get you help and get it early. We don't want our family members to be our care providers. We want them to be our care managers. We want them to be the ones that are working with the agencies, working with the nurses, and coordinating that care, but not be the ones that are caring for us personally. So we mentioned Medicaid. There's 4 other ways that we can pay for long-term care, and I'm going to walk you through each one of them. The first is self-insuring. Self-insuring is nothing more than using your own retirement assets. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have enough money set to the side to be able to pay for somewhere between $200,000 and potentially $300,000 a year, that's great. But it's not the most efficient way to do it. That's what insurance is for. It's a way that we can create efficiencies and have it cost less than if we're to use our own money. So from an insurance perspective, there's 3 types of insurance and 3 types only that will help offset those costs and pay for your long-term care expenses. The first is what's called traditional long-term care. Traditional long-term care looks and feels a lot like car insurance. You pay a premium every year. If and when you need assistance, it'll pay out a benefit. There's good and bad to it. The good is it's cheaper than using your own assets. The bad is historically, we have seen that insurance companies have the ability and will raise the rates or raise your premium throughout your life. So essentially, if you get a long-term care policy in your 50s, it's very likely that by the time you're in your 60s or even 70s, you could be paying double, triple, if not 4 times what it was that you signed up for. The other downside to it is just like car insurance. If you're a good driver with car insurance, you get no benefit out of that owning it. And with long-term care insurance, it's the same. If you're a part of the 30% of people that the Lord takes quickly, to put bluntly, and you don't need care, it just became a very big expense throughout your entire life that provided you no benefit. So we don't really work with traditional long-term care as frequently as we used to before, because the other two forms of insurance were introduced to directly offset those issues or negative aspects of traditional long-term care insurance. So number two, it's not on the slide here, but it's life insurance with a long-term care rider. All that means is you have a life insurance policy. It's going to pay out a death benefit when you pass away that you can use while you're alive when you decline. It'll pay a portion of your death benefit each month to cover your long-term care expenses. The good to that is you're always going to get a positive return on your investment. That's how life insurance works. You give the insurance company a little bit of money, they're going to pay out more than you put in, either when you pass away or if you need it for long-term care. The downside to it is if our sole purpose, our sole focus for this is to cover long-term care expenses, it's not the cheapest way to do it. Now, if your goal is to leave a legacy as well as protect against a long-term care event, life insurance with a rider is fantastic because it can kill two birds with one stone, if you will. If your primary focus is covering long-term care expenses, that's where we have created what's called a hybrid long-term care insurance policy. And it's nothing more than a blend between those other two types of insurance. It offers a death benefit and the tax benefits of life insurance, but the leverage of long-term care insurance. So instead of the first one where our death benefit and our long-term care bucket of dollars are one and the same, we have a smaller death benefit. It'll be more than money than we paid into the policy, but we'll have a much, much larger pool for long-term care dollars, making it a cheaper solution, if you will. I hate to use that word when comparing it to life insurance with a long-term care rider. Now, I'm not here to tell you one option is better than the other. There's good and bad to all of them. Whatever's right depends on you, your goals, and your personal financial situation. So we're going to talk about the impact of a long-term care event, because while it is a difficult thing to do when our health declines, it creates ripples throughout the family. Because if a family member begins to decline, the first line of defense is going to be our loved ones. Many times a spouse, if still healthy and strong enough, will be the one that takes care of their spouse as they begin to decline. Now, typically folks are aging together and there comes a point where the spouse can no longer take care of their spouse and their children now are the next line of defense. 59%, so the majority of caregivers within a family are women. So women, this is a long-term care is more of a woman's problem than it is men's, just to put it bluntly. The majority of caregivers are women. And because of that, men, we don't need care quite as often because statistically, we die first. We're just going to be blunt here, which leads to our spouses typically taking care of us. And then when the male passes away, it leads to the females that end up needing to go through a long-term care event by themselves. So women are the primary caregivers, whether it's a daughter or it's a spouse, and women are far more likely than men to experience a long-term care event. That's not because we don't decline. It's because of three things. We're far more likely to die in the aisle of Harris Teeter. It just happens more frequently to us. I also think we're stubborn, right? My grandfather should have been in a nursing home well before he passed away, but he was not giving up his driver's license and was never going to stop driving his Ford F-150. And then the other part of it is many times our spouses end up taking care of us. We're going to skip through a few of these. So the reason we have to have this conversation, like I mentioned before, our life expectancy is now much longer than our health expectancy. And those last few years of our lives can erode our retirement portfolio and can decimate what we spent our entire life savings for. Now, if we do a little bit of planning, we can prevent having to liquidate our assets and spend down our assets and do it in a far more efficient manner. So the important thing that you need to think about, I'm in no way here to sell you any form of insurance policy. My job is to encourage you guys to think about this, because as I mentioned before, everyone has their own plan. It's either your healthcare plan or somebody else's that's going to step in and make the decisions for you. So the important things that you need to think about are three things. Who's going to provide your care? Is it going to be a family member, or are we going to have professional care? Two, where would we like to age? Most folks want to age in their house. And if that's where you would like to age, you need to make sure you're ready for what that means. We may need to do renovations around the house, putting a wheelchair ramp in the house. We may need to have a nurse coming to the house. And if we're getting around the clock care in home, it can be very, very costly, which is why we need to think about the third leg to the stool here. How are we going to pay for that care? Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about hybrid solutions. Remember, there was those three types of long-term care solutions. We had traditional long-term care, life insurance with a long-term care rider, and the hybrid, which is a blend of the other two. There are many different insurance companies that offer these hybrid solutions. But when you think about how they work, I want you to put your mind to think about it with three buckets. We have a bucket that is our long-term care dollars, a bucket that is our death benefit, and a bucket that is our liquidity, right? What do we get if I wanted to stop with my insurance policy and walk away? What could I put in my pocket? What separates all of the policies or products on the marketplace is what drives up the value of your long-term care bucket. We have some that are fixed, that are guaranteed, just like a CD, where it's going to credit a certain amount each year. We have ones that are tied to the market, where it's going to look and feel more like a retirement account. There's not one that's better than the other. They are customized for what you and your goals and your risk tolerance are. We customize them personally for you. So I want to first start by talking about the market-driven solution. This is what I recommend, and I'm not here to make any recommendations, but the vast majority of the folks that I work with are under 60 when they look to utilize the market, because they have the time to ride the ups and downs of the market and take advantage of the returns, so that we can put in a little bit of money and get a heck of a lot more when we need it. So from a high level, this type of insurance does not feel like purchasing insurance. It feels much more like repositioning assets into a tax-advantaged account. I compare it to a 529 plan. If you're familiar with that, it's an investment account where we put our money into the market. It grows without us ever paying taxes on the trades, and we can pull it out tax-free as long as we use it for education. This is exactly the same, but it's for your healthcare instead of education. So it has all of the same types of investments that you would find in a 401k or an IRA. What makes it attractive is the day that you go on claim, the value of your investment portfolio is multiplied by 4. So 400% the day you need to get professional help. And that's what becomes your pool of long-term care dollars. And all of it comes out completely tax-free. So just kind of from a high level, we'll put some very rough numbers behind that so you can see what I'm talking about. And we're just using even numbers here. If you were to take $100,000 and put it into the market when you're in your, let's say, mid-50s, by the time you're in your mid-80s, it could grow to $300,000. Now, you have access to that $300,000 to use it for whatever the heck you want to use it for. If you wanted to pull out 20 grand to put a new roof on your house, go ahead, do it. You have the ability to do so. Once we go on claim, or once we start to need professional care, that $300,000 is immediately converted into 4 times that. So we would have $1.2 million available for long-term care. As we mentioned before, it's got a long-term care bucket, it's got a death benefit and a liquidity option. Your death benefit would stay 30% higher than what your investment account is. So if we don't need it for long-term care, it still becomes a good return on our investment that's going to pass tax-free to our spouse or to our beneficiaries. So from a very high level, we have putting money into the market, grows tax deferred. We can pull it out tax-free for healthcare. The day we need it, it's multiplied by 400%, 4 times, and that's what we have available for long-term care. Now, some of the most common questions that I get as I meet with hundreds and hundreds of people every year and help them formalize a healthcare plan. When's the right time to start thinking about when you should start planning for long-term care? I have a couple schools of thought on this. Most folks don't think about it until they experience it themselves. In fact, the vast majority of individuals have no idea that Medicare is not going to cover all of their healthcare in retirement. Most folks don't think about it until they see something happen to their mom and dad, and now they realize they have to do something for themselves. Many times those individuals may be in their late 60s at that point, and we may not even be insurable because we've waited too long. So in my opinion, this is something you should start thinking about as early as possible. It's just like planning for retirement. When's the right time to plan for retirement? As soon as you can pay your bills and then have some money left over, you should start putting it away from retirement. From a long-term care perspective, as soon as we're building a foundation to our retirement, and we have some money left over, that's a great time to start planning for the things that can derail your retirement, which is taxes and healthcare. From a numbers perspective, if I was to put a date on it, I would say your last 10 years of working. 10 years before retirement, you should focus on trying to protect against the things that can derail it. So you want to do it while you're still working so that you're not carrying an expense into retirement. My goal when I work with individuals is to have these paid off so you have no more premiums due once you enter retirement. That's always our goal, is to reduce our expenses in retirement so that we can have a far more comfortable life. And it's important to do this while you're healthy enough, because with any form of insurance, there is an underwriting process. And it's not like life insurance. You don't have to do a medical exam. All we're looking at is what sort of prescription medication you're taking and any sort of surgeries or current ailments you may have. So I'm going to actually pull something up on the screen here. This is just a very high level of things that would prevent you from qualifying for long-term care insurance. You don't need to look at all of these, but I show this just to make sure I'm hitting home the fact that it's very important to do this while we're healthy enough, because there's going to become a time where we can no longer qualify for insurance and we no longer have options for the three forms of insurance. We're forced to either self-insure or think about spending down our assets until we qualify for Medicaid. So we have to start doing this planning when we're healthy enough. I'm 38 years old, 39. Gosh, I'm turning 40 in a couple weeks. But I got my policy last year. Traditionally, that is way younger than folks would normally do for long-term care planning. I'm a little biased. I work in this industry for a living, but I was able to lock in my insurability. I've got that market product that I just talked through with you that I'm going to fund over for a couple years. And then I'll stop paying any premiums until I'm in my mid-50s and even 60s. Once I've fully funded my retirement, I'm going to start stuffing money in there. But to me, it was important that I open that account while I'm healthy enough to qualify, because what's on the screen, these are things that will immediately prevent you from qualifying from any form of long-term care insurance. They'll also decline you if you have a handicap sticker in your car. So these are things that everyone should have, but not everyone can qualify for. So it's very important to do these things while you're young enough, while you're healthy enough, and in my opinion, in your final years of working, so you don't carry an expense into retirement. So with that, I know I chatted for a while. I'll stop there. Marcus, is there any comments that you'd like to give yourself, or can we open it up for questions or comments? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, wonderful information first and foremost. And I've been watching the Q&A feature. So if anyone does have questions, please feel free to submit those. Now, a few things that I made note of, I guess I'll start off with that solution. How old do you have to be to qualify for this? I thought this was like an age 50 issue.
Yeah.
Yes. How soon could that be started?
So we work with anyone from the age of 30 and 80. So you have to be at least 30 years old. Right. Over 80. That being said, on the back end, it's very difficult to get coverage when you're in your 70s. The vast majority of individuals are dealing with arthritis, maybe getting joint injections, maybe have had some heart valve replacements, which we can actually work with. But it's just tougher to qualify once you're in your 70s. So we really like folks that are between 30 and 70, but we can work with individuals all the way up to 80 years old.
All right, might be asking for an illustration later for myself. Thank you. Now, to that point about unhealthy, right? So if you are unhealthy, what would you suggest, right? What if you were, because I know you mentioned two things. One, when's the better time to address it? Clearly, it's when you're in good health, and ideally 10 years before you're fully retired. And I think the reason you specifically say that is because if there's a solution to have it paid up or maybe just be finalized on your expenses, typically you don't want to carry expenses into retirement. Yep. But what if maybe you're not 10 years to retirement, maybe you're 3, or maybe if you're just recently officially retired, but still early 60s, what would you do for that? And what if you're not fully healthy? What are some ideas to address, just the long-term care funding?
Yeah, great question. So the best time to plant a tree was always yesterday, right? But the second best time is today. So it's never too late to start thinking about this, at least from an age perspective. Now, if you can't qualify, if you do have something that's going to prevent you from qualifying, a couple pieces of thought around that. First, I think that becomes far more important for your spouse, if you have one, to do the planning, if they are healthy enough. Because if you can't qualify, that means you're a higher risk to needing a long-term care event. And a lot of folks can support, or a lot of retirement portfolios can support one individual having a long-term care event. What becomes financially devastating when both spouses have a long-term care event. So if you can't qualify, in my opinion, it becomes far more important that you do the planning for your spouse if they are healthy enough to qualify. Now, if neither of you can qualify, then I think it goes back to those sort of three things that you need to think about. It becomes more important. The first one is who's going to care for you. If you can't qualify, then maybe your plan will be, let's get some family members to help out to take care of me as long as possible. Now, there are vehicles that you can use for folks that can't qualify. I'll just kind of mention it from a high level. They have these annuities that you can get that'll pay out a tax-free and higher payout if you need it for long-term care. So there are solutions that are available if you can't qualify. They just don't give you the same amount of leverage, right? The products that you have to get underwritten for give you far more leverage because the insurance companies look at your medical records and are more comfortable taking on that risk. And then lastly, if you don't want to use the annuity or any form of insurance, I think it's important to know what assets you have that you could use. We want to think about what assets do we want to liquidate, which ones are we going to pay the least amount of taxes on as we're using it to pay for the long-term care expenses. And then lastly, as a last resort scenario, we start looking at options to spend down our assets. Maybe we gift them to a family member. You're allowed to gift up to, right now, $14 million without having to pay taxes. You can use what's called your lifetime exemption. So maybe it makes sense to start gifting assets to your children or to a loved one so that they don't show in your name, and then you can qualify for Medicaid. Lastly, like I mentioned in the beginning, there's what's called a Medicaid trust, where you can work with an attorney and they'll draft a trust where you can hold your assets so that you're reporting zero to the IRS, but you have to do that planning 5 years before your health starts to decline. So if you can't get insurance, you're probably going to have to self-insure. Do you have the safety net of family members? Have the conversation with your family members so you can talk about where you want to age. Think about, do you want to do it in your house? Is there a nice assisted living facility? All of those options are better than a nursing home. So the goal is to do the planning to either age in home or in assisted living facility to help delay or prevent you needing to go to a nursing home. And then from a nursing home perspective, you really get what you pay for. There's very, very nice nursing homes that are very, very expensive. They call them the Ritz-Carlton of nursing homes. And then the ones that are affordable are the Walmart Great Value version. So I just encourage you to go to the website I gave in the beginning, do your research so you can see what they cost today. Think about where you want to age and how you're going to pay for it.
Now, speaking of that, there are a few notes that I did make. And again, I'm just watching for any Q&A in case anybody else has any additional questions. A few notes that I made. So you had a slide that was talking about different ways of addressing or planning to pay for care or receiving care. We kind of talk about the pros and cons of each, right? So I'll say two notes for each. One, what Medicaid requires, right? One is it requires a spend down. So maybe you do have savings, maybe you do have property, you have real estate, so on and so forth. And there are certain protections if you are married at the time that you need care. So it's not that you have to spend everything down and leave your spouse without anything at all. There are certain protections. However, those limits may be lower than the value of your property and the value of your retirement assets, right? So there are certain spend down requirements, but if you are an individual, so say you're a surviving widow, whether you're a male or woman, you're a surviving widow, then yeah, your spend down may be that $2,000 in net worth. and any income in excess of the poverty level is directed to your care. So one, the issue with Medicaid, it's not that people can't get it, it's the fact that you have to spend down just about everything if you're a single person in needing care, or if you're a surviving, or if you're a spouse, then you're spending down a significant portion of your assets to qualify for Medicaid. And then number two that I wrote down is that Medicaid is only provided in a facility. So that's very tragic for someone that, yes, may require care, but maybe they don't want to go to a facility, which leads to another point, is that different medical conditions may warrant different needs of care, right? So as you said, losing the ability to perform two activities of daily living doesn't necessarily mean you need assisted nursing to the point that you have to be in a facility, right? Some of that care that you need may be provided in a home, right? In your own home. So the Medicaid plan, what that comes at a consequence of is that you're required to spend down, right? And hopefully, if you can predict it, you do it at the right time, because it's a 5-year look back period, and staying 5 years and living 5 years are two different things, right? I feel like we can say 5 years, but having a grandmother that has dementia and her owning a home in 2019, 2018, 2017, but it not being sold until 2021, living 5 years from 2021 is a very long time before she's eligible for Medicaid, right? So timing it is one observation. I just, hearing it from somebody else, even though I know it, it just hits different. But the spin down, right? The 5-year look back in facility is important to understand with Medicaid. Another perspective that I don't think I realized, we talk about family. Generationally, it kind of hits me, because my father has 3 siblings, it's 4 of them. My mother has 4 siblings, it's 5 of them.
Yep.
My parents only have my brother and I, it's 2 of us, right? And right now, my brother and I, neither one of us have kids. So when you talk about generationally, the family disparity of how many siblings come from parents, it's like, if my parents need care, well, that responsibility is not shared with 4 or 5 siblings, it's just on 2. Yep. So I could easily see a large, to your point, increasing demand for anybody who is entering into retirement and think about your family. If you expect your kids to provide your care, how many kids will that responsibility be shared between? If you had 4 or 5, 6, 7 kids, then great, right? Maybe you have a better chance of families providing that care. But if you find that you have 1 or 2 and they're raising families of their own, that's a lot more stress on families to provide that care. So that's one amazing observation. And then when you couple that with family and proximity, right? I just moved to Charlotte earlier this year. My parents are in Hampton, Virginia. So Zoom and FaceTime keeps us close, but that's 5 hours of time between me and them, right? So when you talk about not only having 2 children to provide care, but one being an hour and a half in Richmond, where my brother lives, and 5 hours away where I live, yeah, you can see how that provides a challenge. So I think that family observation is very astute. That is a wonderful observation.
Yep.
So those are just some of the things that I took away from the conversation to this point. And I'll just pause for any other questions from anybody else that's attending. But did you have anything else to share from your end?
Yeah, so one more thing, and maybe 2 more things. You mentioned nursing homes and Medicaid, and this is important, because when you're getting into a nursing home, there's 2 types of nursing homes. There's one that do work with Medicaid, and there's ones that don't work with Medicaid. Quite frankly, any nicer nursing home is not going to work with Medicaid at all. They do an asset verification process when you're trying to get into the nursing home. So they'll look at how much money you have to make sure that if you're in there for 5 or 6 years, you're not going to run out of money, because they're never going to kick somebody out of the nursing home. But those non-Medicaid nursing homes, where the people want to go, are starting to prioritize people that have insurance, because they're getting very competitive to get into. And they do the asset verification. So insurance is not just about paying for healthcare. It also gives you access to the nicer facilities, because if not, you're going to have to go to a Medicaid facility where what they'll allow you to do is spend down your assets until Medicaid triggers on. So you end up just paying the nursing home out of your pocket until you run out of money, and then it'll trigger on Medicaid. But if you don't have insurance, you're almost forced to look at one of those Medicaid facilities, and they're just not as nice as the ones that don't work with Medicaid. So it's once again, it's very important to do these things while you're healthy enough, because your options become limited as you get older, and you could be forced to go into somewhere that you don't necessarily want to be. The last thing I'll bring up, and you just mentioned it, is that ripple effect on family members. It's not just having to be the physical labor that goes along with being a caregiver. Many times that means your child having to take time off of work during their prime working years where they're trying to prepare for retirement. They might be in their 40s or 50s, which is supposed to be their peak earning years. And maybe you're taking only a little bit of time off of work, which could lead to you not getting a promotion or, getting paid much less than you normally would. A lot of times we see folks have to quit work completely, and that could have an impact on grandchildren, on your children. So there's a massive ripple effect. And then the last statistic I'll share with you, caregivers are twice as likely to need care themselves. So if you are a physical caregiver of a family member, it typically has a very physical and mental toll on your body. It is draining to have to watch a family member go through that and be the one that has to pick them up off the bathroom floor. And it typically leads to health issues onsetting on yourself, which increase your likelihood of needing care yourself. So there's a very big ripple impact, not just from what you go through, but from what the rest of the family goes through as well.
Man, that eye-opening for me, because again, I have parents that are providing care for my nana, so probably sure thing I'm gonna be providing care at some point in time in the future. Yep. So those things being said, no questions or no comments coming in through the Q&A, so we will lead to a close. One additional question I'll ask before we get to the closing statements. Earlier you mentioned that there's a difference when we look at insurance being the solution, right? We talked about traditional long-term care, where the challenges have been around traditional long-term care. One being just the cost for it, right? The cost for traditional long-term care insurance over time, how they've become a lot more expensive just because of underwriting and other things. To the risk with traditional long-term care being use it or lose it, right? So if you do have chronic illness where you do need that policy, that being there to be paid out, but maybe you just calmly transition, you pass away in your sleep, or maybe you pass away due to old age or heartbreak that doesn't necessarily require medical nursing or skilled nursing or anything along those lines. And we introduced a new view of insurance where we're saying, hey, life insurance can play a role in long-term care, but you differentiated between life insurance with a long-term care rider and a hybrid policy. Can you just re-explain the difference between the two? Because it sounds like there's still both life insurance, but one may favor long-term care more than one with a rider. Can you just re-explain the difference between the two?
Yeah, so life insurance with a long-term care rider means your death benefit is your bucket of long-term care dollars. So if you've got a life insurance policy with, let's just say, a $500,000 death benefit, you would be able to get 2 or 4% of that each month to pay for your long-term care expenses. So because your life insurance bucket or your death benefit and your long-term care bucket are one and the same, it's a bit more expensive if our primary focus is long-term care. Now, if our primary goal is to leave a legacy to the children, and our secondary goal is to also protect against that legacy getting eroded from a long-term care event, then great, life insurance with the long-term care rider is a fantastic solution. The other hybrid policy separates your death benefit and your long-term care benefit. So you have a much smaller death benefit compared to your pool of long-term care dollars. You might have a death benefit that's, let's say, $100,000, but your long-term care pool is $750,000. So it becomes more efficient, not from a wealth transfer perspective, but from a long-term care perspective. So there's no one that's better than the other. There's a right solution based off of your specific needs, goals, dynamics, family lifestyle, and current financial standings. So just to summarize, life insurance with a rider, one bucket of dollars, both death benefit and long-term care. Hybrid policies, smaller death benefit, much, much larger pool of long-term care dollars.
You know, honestly, Mike, that is a wonderful explanation, because even as you said that, I could think of two families that I currently work with that have two different purposes. I have one client that, yes, their primary concern was legacy, and they wanted to leave a specific amount for their children when they die, right? The long-term care for them, whether it's right or wrong, but the long-term care for them was not the number one priority. It's, hey, you know, I believe I'm fine. Family will step in. We have enough assets. We have enough resources. I just want the life insurance as a flexible tool if I do, but unequivocally, I want to leave money. So that approach was perfect for them. But then I do have a client who, yeah, long-term care is more of the concern. And we know eventually when we die, I do want to have a death benefit, but I'm more concerned about long-term care. So for them, that hybrid approach seems to be the better solution, right? They're, you know, barring approval and everything else. But I love how you explain the difference in priority and how you can use both of those to address both of those needs. So I really love that explanation there.
Yeah.
I have one question somebody asked: is the hybrid an investment account? I think that's a great question. Just kind of clarifying, because I know you mentioned it, but can you just talk again? Is the hybrid an actual investment account, or, you know, can it be fixed? Is it variable? Is it life? Is it an investment?
Great question. So there's two types of hybrid policies. There's one that's fixed, so it's not investment focused at all. It's going to grow by a guaranteed 3% return every year. It looks and feels just like a CD. Or we have one that is investment focused. Now, it's not an investment account, it's an insurance policy, but it looks and feels like an investment account. So you're going to have mutual fund selections that are very, very similar and look almost exactly like a 401k or an IRA. And it's, as opposed to having our long-term care pool grow by 3%, we're now using the stock market to drive it up. So it's not technically an investment account, but it looks and feels like it, because you even have access to the money that's inside of it for things that aren't long-term care. It's just an investment account inside of an insurance wrapper, because that's what gives us, one, the leverage, but two, the tax benefits. That's why we can pull it out of that investment account tax-free, because it is an investment account that's inside of an insurance. So depending on your age and your risk tolerance, there's a product that's built specifically for you. There's one that's fixed, that there is zero risk at all. It's guaranteed. You'd never have to pay another premium. Premiums can never go up. Your benefits can never go down. It's always going to grow by 3% until you need it. And then we have ones that are a bit more risky, but the market has proven to be a better driver of growing the value to keep up with and outpace inflation. That's why we use it to get to where we're going to be in retirement. That's why we use the market. And we can also use the market to grow our pool of dollars to plan for healthcare and retirement as well.
Yeah, and I want to say, Mike, we actually looked at a case where there was a perfect sweet spot for that variable solution specifically. Now, that's, a very specific case, but, you know, we had clients that, you know, early 50s, reaching mid 50s, thinking about long-term care, concerned about it. You know, ultimately they weren't ready to fully address it, but when we looked at that solution, you know, it was affordable for them, you know, question on the insurability as always, but it was affordable. And, you know, that specific solution we looked at, it was paid up in 10 years. So to your point, this was an expense that we were front loading that would not be carried into retirement, right? So we get it paid up right at the time of retirement. And based on projection, right, again, you got 20 years possibly from 65 before you need to use it. That's time value of money. So you got 20 years to just allow accumulation in the market to do its work. And with the funding of it, it really became a very lucrative asset for long-term care. And I guess the hybrid solution was, well, if she passes away without needing it, well, now we have a tax-free death benefit. So there was like a very, very beautiful sweet spot for that approach that, it can really make a lot of sense if the context is right. So, yeah. Well, just monitoring time, just to bring things to a close. First, I want to thank everyone for being in attendance, barring the setback with our time. To, Mr. Mike, thank you so much for your support, your professionalism, and the insight that you provided us. To conclude with the presentation, I started with a few keys that you want to keep in mind as you're addressing long-term care planning. Key number one, understand that long-term care isn't about an elderly person sitting in a nursing home. It's a range of services designed to help people with health and personal care needs. Key number two, counting on Medicare or Medicaid is not a plan that most people want to rely on. As you've heard from talking about Medicaid, the two major requirements, really three, it's spend down, but it's spend down within 5 years. So that's a further parameter. And then it requires you to go to a facility. So it may not be something that you really want to plan unless that's what your circumstance warrants. Key number three, given historic problems with traditional long-term care insurance, it's understandable that people have avoided making a plan altogether. So the reason I'm excited to have had Michael here with me is this is a way of addressing how to fund long-term care. And then option number four are new approaches, i.e., Mike, the planning for long-term care address people's skepticism and provide a wide range of flexible options for people at all stages. So as always, we want to continue to be your support, your financial resource, and we thank you for the trust that you place in professionals like Michael and I. Again, if you have any other questions from anything that you've heard today, feel free to submit those. But I will bid everyone a good evening. Go Steelers, go. Shout out to the Patriots. Good luck with the Patriots this weekend. I can say that because we played them earlier in the year, so we got that out of the way. And hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Hey, thanks, Marcus. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.